Mate, 40 here. Haven't done any of my evening shows for 3 days. Just enjoying some time off. I usually only stream when I have something compelling to share. And I just didn't feel compelled to talk about anything the last 2 nights. Now, here's something that strikes me about all the discussion on disinformation with regard to the anti-immigration riots in the United Kingdom. And there is disinformation on social media, on the platform X. And I wish Elon Musk had better judgment in what he tweets. Right? A significant amount of what he tweets is unnecessary provocation, it's nonsense. Sometimes it's just downright false. I wish Elon Musk wasn't partisan, even though he's supporting Donald Trump in this election. I kind of wish he wasn't. I just wish he would stick to doing his job. He makes a lot of crazy tweets. So I recognize that this is a problem on the platform X. But what never gets mentioned in discussions of disinformation is how much that the mainstream media puts out. For example, the summer of George Floyd, summer of 2020, mainstream media pushed the false narrative that the police were systemically racist against young black men. And it's false. Right? The number of unarmed black men who are killed by police each year in the United States is about 10, 12. And if you're black, you're less likely to be shot by police compared to other groups. So this disinformation fed by the mainstream media led to tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths because police were incentivized to do less work, to back off from enforcement. So you have more reckless behavior as a result, reckless driving, death, vast increase in the death of pedestrians, and vast increase in murder rates in the black community and also the Latino community. And so this is mainstream media, New York Times, CNN, NBC News, Washington Post, LA Times, disinformation that's led to tens of thousands of additional deaths in the United States. So I'm sure that you can make a strong case for disinformation on the platform X leading to deaths. But I don't think you could make the case that it leads to anything like the number of deaths that we've seen due to disinformation pushed by the mainstream media. Also, for 3 years, the top story in the mainstream media between 2016 and 2019 was that Donald Trump had extensive ties with Russia that may well have led to Russia hacking the 2016 presidential election. And that was the inference. So usually the mainstream media was fairly careful on its facts, but the inference that partisan Democrats took from it was that Russia had stolen the 2016 election. And so for 3 years, that was the number one story in the news media. And that was not the number one news story on a reality basis, right? That was a partisan job to try to assuage the feelings of elites in general, Democrats in particular, for how bad they'd understood the 2016 election, right? How they'd missed the chance that Donald Trump would win. So to assuage their hurt, outraged feelings, you had a lot of focus on the connection between Trump and Russia, which turned out to be a whole lot of nothing. Then there's also the disinformation pushed out by the mainstream media in the sense that it purports to tell you the most important things that are going on in the day, when really what it primarily tells you is the passage of events through bureaucratic processes. Right? The news media has to rely on the pronouncements and releases of bureaucracies so that it can give you information that it's not going to get sued for. And if you know people who are leading impressive lives, right, you know that many of them, perhaps most of them, don't pay much attention to the news. It verges on the impossible to try to make the case that consumption of news is a vital part of the thinking man's day. In fact, the news will, in many ways, give you a more distorted presentation of reality than if you didn't pay attention to the news. So this too is a type of disinformation. The news media does not think it's lying when it exaggerates the importance of stories, right? Exclusive, breaking news, right? Most of the time when Fox News and other news gives the breaking news graphic, right, it's not breaking news. It's an attempt to manipulate our neural system, our nervous system, into thinking that something exciting is happening, and to develop addicts, right? A lot of people are addicted to following the news, and I certainly fall into that at times. Over the past 10 days, I've often been frantically reloading Twitter to try to find out the latest about Israel and Iran. Right? I've gotten caught up in the hype that Iran and its proxies such as Hezbollah are going to launch a massive attack on Israel, and I'm concerned, and I keep reloading the news, trying to find out the latest on that. And 10 days, 2 weeks have gone by and nothing's happened. And so the news just routinely tries to distort what's really important in life, and they routinely exaggerate the importance of what they broadcast for the sake of keeping you hooked, keeping you subscribing and donating, keeping you part of their ecosphere. And much of it's essentially a lie. If you dramatically exaggerate the importance of what you're saying, you're participating in a form of lying. So I welcome the misinformation critiques of the social media platform X and other social media platforms, but the mainstream media doesn't seem to employ the same critiques on itself. Now, on the other hand, there are virtues in the mainstream media. So they have certain fact-checking processes that often result in more accurate and more careful reporting than that done by individuals with no accountability on social media. And then other times, individuals with no accountability on social media provide more profound, more important, more accurate, and more rapid truths than what you get in the mainstream media. So it's not as though there's just one way of learning about the world that's infinitely superior to all others when comparing social media with the mainstream media. So I've been watching Mark Halperin's show quite a bit, so twice a day. And for the last week, he's been saying that many Republicans are telling him essentially that the race is over and that Kamala Harris is going to win. And many Democratic operatives think the same thing. So Mark Halperin says that's not his perspective. But I think it's worth pointing out a lot of intelligent, smart people do see Kamala Harris's momentum as real, and they see no inherent reason why it's not going to run through to the election. And whether or not Kamala Harris ever gives a press conference or an interview will depend on her best interests. And Mark Halperin makes the point that the people running her election campaign are the best, right? That these are Hall of Fame quality political operatives, and they'll roll her out to do interviews and a news conference only if they receive data that indicates that's an absolute necessity. Because Kamala Harris does well on a script, and she's been enthusiastic for the last 2 weeks. But how long is she going to be able to maintain that enthusiasm with a script? Right, so in many ways it's easier to operate off a script, but it's harder to maintain your emotional intensity when you're operating off a script. And you can see that in the difference between day one of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz putting on a rally and day two. So by day two, the enthusiasm, the excitement, the energy, the joy was considerably diminished compared to day one. So what will day three look like? Trump hasn't operated a rally in 4 days. He's never been a particularly hard worker. So there's this idea that character is destiny. Donald Trump has never been a workaholic. He's never been particularly good at running things. The two people at the top of his campaign, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, do seem to be very good at running things. But another unavoidable truth is that since 20 minutes into his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump has run an undisciplined campaign. Right? Days are going by, and Donald Trump is not successfully making the case that Kamala Harris represents the Biden administration's failed policies with regard to inflation, immigration, and crime. Right? That's a winning message, and Donald Trump is not sticking to that winning message. He's making demented rants about the Republican governor of Georgia. It's just insane, unnecessarily attacking his own, right? Diminishing the unity and enthusiasm in his own party. He gives a sprawling interview on Fox News where he's just all over the place. So, seems to be pretty good evidence that Donald Trump has ADHD. And I think for his third debate against Hillary Clinton, he was much more disciplined. It seemed that he'd been taking Adderall, while for the first two debates he was just all over the place. And it feels like the last 2.5 weeks, Donald Trump has gone off his Adderall. And he's just chaotic all over the place, just giving in to the most petty of his impulses. He's ranting on Truth Social about the Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp and diminishing the unity, enthusiasm, excitement, and energy within his own party by unnecessarily targeting fire on his own on a popular Republican incumbent governor in Georgia. My God, man. Don't you know, Donald Trump, that if you lose this election, then you're very likely to spend the rest of your life in prison? Donald Trump seems to have forgotten this the last 2.5 weeks. He's just gone off message, gone rogue, just given in to his impulses. A good article by Simon Cooper in the Financial Times today about how Olympic medals are a good proxy for the health and wealth of a nation. Right? The wealthier your nation and the more free your nation, the more likely it is that individuals in your nation will be able to fulfill their own special gifts. And so in wealthy nations such as Norway and Australia, if you have athletic gifts, for example, there are all sorts of opportunities to display them. But it's not just athletic gifts, right? If you have computer coding gifts or musical gifts, right? If you've been released from the iron jaws of necessity to follow your bliss, right? You can do that much more easily in prosperous, democratic, free countries. And so you see democratic, free countries dominating at the Olympics, and poorer countries just unable to keep up. So Norway, I think per capita is about the most dominant nation state in the Olympics, and it's about the most prosperous per capita nation state in the Olympics. And the other nation states that dominate are United States, France, Australia, right? Prosperous, free, democratic countries where people have the space to pursue their own proclivities and to follow their own special talents, and that there are institutions that can maximize your abilities. So the winner of the 400-meter race for men, he doesn't take advantage of institutions apparently, or a hands-on coach. He just gets coached by phone calls with his former community college coach. But generally speaking, athletes do better when they work within a club, within a structure, within an institution. And they're just more effective, more advanced institutions in affluent countries than in poor ones. So there was a strange moment after the first Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign rally when Tim Walz approached his wife and shook her hand. What kind of man in a moment of exuberance shakes his wife's hand? Now, that could have absolutely no significance, or, as Laura Loomer indicates, right, there might be much more to what Tim Walz's proclivities are, and they may necessarily run in the direction of women. So that's under news item. We'll see what comes out on that. We also see that Tim Walz has a history of overstating his military service. The most used term for this kind of lie is stolen valor. And there is substance to these allegations. But it's not going to win the election for the Republicans, right? To the extent that this issue has merit, it is to shine a light on Kamala Harris's decision-making. And it appears that number one reason that she chose Tim Walz versus Kamala Harris is that he's easy. And that's often been my number one criterion for who I date, right? I have been a womanizer, but a very lazy womanizer, right? I've never really been willing to put much effort into it. And high maintenance women, they just have always seemed to be too much trouble for me. So probably at best I've done occasional dating of middle maintenance women, but I've never been willing to take on a high maintenance woman, even one who has, formidable qualities that would justify the high maintenance woman. Right? I got a friend who's a high maintenance woman, and she's phenomenal. Right? She's highly intelligent. She's a great cook. She's great company. She's highly accomplished. And so she has many great qualities, and she's a challenging, difficult woman. And I have, in my dating life, often found it just easier to slum it with women who wouldn't challenge me, with women who would, just put up with what I had to offer and didn't push for more. No, I'm not proud of this trait. I'm not ashamed of it either. It's just that's the honest truth of my approach to dating. I've never been willing to expend a great deal of effort. Probably a reason why I'm still a bachelor at age 58. And my friends who are married to hot women, they talk about how much more demanding it is. Because right, the hotter the woman you're with, the more options she has, right, the more attention she's going to get from other men. So compared to Josh Shapiro, right, with his seriousness, with his rhetorical abilities, right, with his intellect, Kamala Harris looks like a silly ditz. Right, Kamala Harris got into law school thanks to affirmative action. She failed the California State Bar the first time she took it. Right, she's not the brightest bulb. I'm talking about an IQ around 115, 120. But next to Tim Walz, she doesn't seem silly and ditzy. She just seems joyful so far. Right? So too, it was a lot easier for me to date women who didn't demand a lot, who were willing to fit themselves into my schedule and my proclivities. So compared to Josh Shapiro, Kamala Harris seems silly, seems like a lightweight, seems inept, inarticulate, not up to the job, right? If she had chosen Josh Shapiro, he would have consistently outshone her. She would have looked less by comparison. But next to Tim Walz, that doesn't happen. Also, if she'd chosen Josh Shapiro, right, she would have appeared frumpy because Josh Shapiro is just not cognitively elite and rhetorically elite and serious. He is put together, right? He takes the whole package seriously. And so next to Josh Shapiro, Kamala Harris would not just appear silly and ditzy and lightweight, she would also appear frumpy, unattractive, and old. Right? Compared to Tim Walz, she looks great. When she's presenting with Tim Walz, well, he does outshine her rhetorically. Right? He is a much better public speaker. He is much less self-conscious. So Kamala Harris is highly self-conscious because she's highly insecure. Hillary Clinton, highly self-conscious, highly insecure. And so Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, right, two Democratic nominees for president who are ill at ease with themselves and consequently make the people around them ill at ease. Tim Walz is not self-conscious, right? He is not calculating everything that he says. And so that's perhaps one reason why he gets into trouble sometimes, because he's not so calculating. But Kamala Harris is fundamentally ill at ease with herself, which is why people around her, for any length of time, they start feeling ill at ease. Right? She's incredibly self-conscious. Like she gives a very performative, mannered, scripted presentation, which in the limited circumstances of the past 2 weeks, with the best political team on the planet behind her and designing her, right, she's done great. But at a certain point, you'd expect that mask to drop, and the awkward hand gestures and the ditzy laugh and the word salad, right? You keep waiting for that to reappear. So Tim Walz is a more effective public speaker and campaigner than I expected. So Kamala and Tim really do release the joy, and often the happier the campaign, right, the more likely it is to win. Just as in an athletic competition, right, the party that appears more at ease, more fluid and flowing, is usually going to win. Now, that's not always true. I was watching the 400-meter final, and the guy who eventually ran, he looked in great pain through most of the race. He looked like he was tightening up. He looked like he was struggling. And then he came from fourth place to win in the last 100 meters. But it was so labored, right? It required so much effort. He seemed to be, fighting his own fatigue and tightening muscles. So that was an example where the more fluid, easy, graceful performer did not win, because he was the opposite of that, and yet he won. But it does speak well of the odds for the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign, that they do exude joy, and their campaign exudes joy. And how long is that going to be sustained? So a lot of questions about Tim Walz. And people, Mark Halperin makes this point that people think you've been vetted because you've been president of the United States, vice president of the United States, such as Kamala Harris, or you've been a senator, a national senator, or a governor of a state, such as Tim Walz. But that is not vetting like these candidates are getting now in the competition for president. So right now, just looking at the face of it, you'd have to say that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are favorites to win. But how much more damaging information is going to come out about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and are Republicans hoarding their ammunition until after the Democratic convention when they start releasing damaging information. So I noticed on Mark Halperin's show, they note that Kamala Harris has won pretty much every news cycle since she became the vice president, since she became the presumed Democratic nominee. But now you have more and more in the mainstream media investigating claims of stolen valor against Tim Walz. And then if he has to drop out, right, that would throw her campaign into chaos. Or if he's wounded sufficiently, right, that would call into question Kamala Harris's judgment. And I'm not a fan of John Podhoretz, but he is fantastic on social media. Right? He is fantastic in the podcasting form. And he made the point that all of Kamala Harris's major decisions so far have had something to do with Israel. That she didn't want to be present for Bibi Netanyahu's speech, that the remarks she gave after meeting Bibi Netanyahu were considerably hostile to Israel. And now that she chose Tim Walz as opposed to the more qualified candidate in Josh Shapiro, again, there seems to be considerable anti-Israel animus, far surpassing anything we saw even with Barack Obama. And so Democrats are trying to rerun the Barack Obama 2008 Hope and Change campaign with Kamala Harris. And she doesn't have Barack Obama's abilities. Right? She's not good speaking spontaneously. She's not graceful in dealing with the press. She's not a good manager. But just on the optics, right, so far it's a winning approach. So it's been really nice just taking the last 2 evenings off, coming home, getting in more of a workout, getting to do more my various exercises and positional release procedures. I really enjoy this Netflix show, New York Homicide and LA Homicide by producer Dick Wolf, based on real homicide stories, documentaries, just compelling, moving. And right now, thinking of the United Kingdom, it appears that the quote-unquote anti-fascist forces are turning out in much higher numbers than the anti-immigration forces. So it's very hard to win when you have virtually all of the elites against you. And so the anti-migration rioters generally seem to come from the 100 IQ level. They don't have many elites on their side. And right now it appears that they're just going to get crushed by the opposition. And right now it appears that they're going to do far more harm to their cause than benefit. So just like the rioters at Charlottesville did far more harm to their cause than benefit, they precipitated tremendous deplatforming, demonetization. You had hundreds of ruined lives as a result of that Charlottesville rally. So too, right now, it appears that the repercussions from these anti-immigration riots in the United Kingdom will be a tremendous setback for their cause. So people often think, oh, if I just take action, right, that will bring me closer to my goals. So I have friends who are bachelors, and we often sit around and discuss our bachelorhood and how we're going to escape that. And I have various friends who always think, oh, no, the solution is taking action. But taking action has got us where we are today. What you want to do is to be effective, and depression, right, often has a highly productive angle to it, because you cease doing the things that you compulsively do. You let go of everything that is voluntary in your efforts, and you reassess your efforts. You reassess how you are devoting your energy. Right? You reassess your priorities. And then you start thinking about a new path. And then you plot out in your mind how that new path might work out for you. And so after a period of stasis, and a period of rest, inactivity, depression, lying low, right? So one reason I took 2 days off from doing my evening stream is that I don't want to do it compulsively. When I don't have something to say, right, just stop. Let go of the habit. Right, expand my field of awareness. Reassess how I'm directing my energy. Reassess my analysis. And then whether it's with regard to your love life or your earning or your political goals, cultural goals, religious goals, right? Think about whether you've been expending energy and effort in a productive fashion, and consider abandoning unproductive courses of action and trying new courses of action. Because taking action does not inherently move you closer to your goals. Right? Often it will push you away from your goals. So I remember I had a friend who said that I was coming across very fake because I was trying to present a certain image of myself, and the more efforts that I was taking to present a normal, respectable, professional image for myself, the more fake I seemed, and it was jarring. So it's better to do nothing than to do something that's destructive. Right? It's better to do nothing than something that's going to handicap your life, cripple your life, diminish your prospects in life, get yourself arrested, get a criminal record, put yourself right in the line of fire for your enemies, or bring yourself to the attention of the police or to your opponents who are, say, more well-funded than you are. It'd be better off to do nothing.